journey for me, I'm excited because, I've gotten to a point in my life that I can share and as objectively as one can, the most traumatic and difficult periods of my life. And it's only adding value to my life. My kind of nerves are coming from how are those around me going to react and how can I be there for them? So I'm, nervous about that because I can't assume that, because when we suffer trauma, we rarely suffer in isolation. It impacts those around us. And what happened to me was not only the biggest thing in my life, but the biggest thing in my family's life as well to have to deal with. So I'm very, very conscious of the impact that what I'm doing, telling my story is having on them. But that's mixed in with some nerves.
Welcome to the 1000 Day Sober podcast. My name is Lee Davy. I am not an alcoholic. I refuse to be anonymous. I am someone who is alcohol free as fuck, baby. And I live a self-led life. I spend every single moment of that life helping other people do the same, like right now. I hope you're all doing well out there in the Strive universe. Hope you're enjoying the podcast and hope you're learning lots and lots and lots about how to live a self-led life, alcohol-free as fuck. Today I have a really great guest for you. His name is Marc Convey. I first met Marc when I stopped drinking and I went into the poker industry. Marc, at the time, I was like a fledgling newbie writer, interviewer. I hadn't even thought about interviewing at the time, actually. Marc was one of the most experienced, top-end, high-end writers and interviewers in the poker industry at that time, right? And an absolute beautiful human being. So I learned a lot from Marc. But these days, he's not in the poker industry anymore. And that is partly one of the reasons why I wanted to get him on the show. I really believe that as human beings, we can easily get into the groove of our path of least resistance, and our job becomes us. We become railwaymen, we become gas fitters, we become electricians, we become poker writers and interviewers, and suddenly that defines us, right? We think that's all we know and that's all we can do, and we become afraid of trying something different. That is not in Marc's playbook. So today he's actually a motivational speaker, goes on stages, goes all around the UK at the moment and worldwide, if you want him to, speaking about his own recovery from a very, very harrowing disaster, really, that happened when he was 14 years of age, which really put him on the brink of death. He actually flatlined twice in the event of this traumatic accident that happened to him. So I wanted him to come on to really talk about his story, because let's be honest, when it comes to being someone who is alcohol free as fuck and living a self-led life, it's very easy for us to throw pity parties. It's very easy for us to be pessimistic. It's very easy for us to focus on the negative versus focusing on the positive, right? The things that we can't do versus the things that we possibly can do. And Marc really has a can-do attitude. And when you listen to Marc's story, I challenge you to not be inspired. I challenge you to think about the things you're not doing and give yourself a good reason why you're not doing it when you listen to Marc's story. So without further ado, I'll shut the hell up and I'll leave you in the capable hands of Marc Convey. If you want to get hold of him and know more about him, just check out the links below, whatever podcast platform or YouTube that you're looking at. All the links to contacting him will be there. Or you can get him on Substack, MakingAMarc. And Marc is with a C, not a K. All right. So without further ado, I'll shut the hell up, leave you in the capable hands of Marc Convey. Yeah, she's got the washing out. So I just told her to run out and get the washing in.
So you're trying to be a kind of a vigilant and supportive partner. But
something like that.
But you're working as well, so you can't run out. You can't keep me waiting.
I'm one of those people who fucks up the main things in my relationship and then tries to make it up with "Oi, get a washing in." She sends her love, by the way. I told her I was speaking to you and she said, "Give it my love." Yeah.
Oh, please send it back. Yeah, it's been too long since I've seen both of you.
I was going to say, probably haven't seen us for a while. Yeah. So do you work in the poker industry anymore, or is it all gone?
No, I gave it all up. It was funny. I was reminiscing about you interviewed me many years ago in Vegas, and it was a lovely article. I don't know if you remember it, and I think I think the title was like I don't know, it was what do you call it? A master of them all, like got lots of skills, but
Jack of all
something.
trades, master of none, or something.
Oh yeah, but you said that's it. Jack of all trades, master of them all, and it was it was a lovely thing. And then I was just thinking to myself, he's going to ask me about poker, and then I remember that article, and maybe in your eyes, I was a master of some of them, but yeah, giving them all up.
Yeah. How did it feel? How did it feel to leave that behind? Because I know it was a big part of your life.
It was. It was absolutely fine. To be fair, I've got an attitude of just very much looking forward, and I'm not one for plateauing. I think you're quite similar to this as well. You feel like you need to keep progressing and you keep adding things. And I felt like I'd hit a glass ceiling, really, especially with the freelance work. When I went and set up a video production company, that circumstances were different. While we eventually pivoted away from making coverage in poker. But no, I don't miss it at all, really. I kind of feel like that it gave me so much. So I just look back with, an immense amount of gratitude of the crazy adventures I have, and given me an opportunity to really develop lots of skill sets that, I'm hoping or trying to put into practice in a lot more purpose these days. So no, nothing but love and gratitude looking back.
I mean, for people listening to this, it's. I mean, I guess there's this good stuff in sticking with one thing for your entirety of your life, and then there's good stuff of not. I mean, for me, had I stayed on the railway when I joined at 16, I would have been retiring in 5 years, and maybe that would have been great. But one of the things I found, and I don't know if you want to touch upon this as well, is it's not until you try something that you realize that your world is so small. Like my world was the railway, and then my world was poker, and even little things like, holy shit, I could earn more money than I did here just by taking control. So like leaving poker, leaving being a gas fitter, leading nursing, whatever the people at the moment are listening to this thinking, shit, I wish I could get away from my thing. There's a big world out there, Mark, right?
Yeah, there really is. And I think change is one of these things that you learn. Similar with public speaking. You're terrified of it the first time. So with change, or if it's forced change and it's hard, and then the next time it comes easier, and then you see that actually change is one door closing, but a bigger door can open. And I think you transition and get to the point where you actually embrace change and realize that change can lead to growth. And that's putting nothing away from people who don't have much change in their life. Some people, if they're fortunate, can just continue to live in this small little world and get through an entire lifetime. But life can throw you some curveballs, and a lot of my change in my life was enforced, and it led to good things. And then I started to embrace it, and it's not like I proactively look for it, but I'm not fearful of change, and I hope it will lead to bigger and better things for me. And people need to realize that change doesn't have to be scary, but it's okay for it to be scary to start with. You just need to just keep at it, and then you'll start to embrace it and realize that actually, change can lead to great things.
Yeah, I found that there's something about my life will stagnate. I think of like still water and the smell and all the shit that fucking ends up in there. And sometimes my life gets like that. My relationships become fraught. I feel overweight, tired. And all of a sudden it's like, shit, right? I'm on this path of least resistance. Like my new change has become my new normal. I need to pull my finger out my ass and do something different. What do you get signals like that? Or did you get a signal like that in poker?
Yeah, little bits. And a lot of it came from sort of small, painful moments, little rejections or opportunities not being there, and someone having control over your own destiny. So even though being freelance it was still, every year was different to the year before. So there was always a sense of uncertainty going on. And I think these things just built up in me as well. But I made it to, as high as I could have done in the industry without joining one of the big gaming companies or just completely changing my role. So I was very, very proud of that. But even at that, the kind of the peak of that mountain for me, still just not being able to be fully in control of my own destiny, that was starting to grow within me. And I could have just carried on and plateaued and, had a very good life and travel around the world. But I would have just been rinsing, repeating the same things I've already done. And, I love new experiences, and I'm not afraid to jump if I have to. So, yeah, so I think change, and I think I was just getting this from what you were saying with your still water metaphor. I think you build more self-awareness, don't you? So the fact that you were saying that you recognize these things happening, that's come from experiencing and refreshing yourself and understanding and more self-aware. And I think I had a level of self-awareness where, despite things being really good, I needed something else to drive me, and change needed to happen for me to find out whatever that was. So no regret.
You said something really important there for the listeners, because there's a lot of people listening to this who are alcohol reliant, or that's in their rearview mirror and they're trying to live more consciously or whatever. And I know when I worked on the railway around 2007, 2008, when the world's economic crisis, going into work every day was really tough. And I remember my shunters in particular down in Markham Knuckle Yard, love you all, even though they hated me, just moaning and groaning every single day about how shit everything was. And what you just said then is a reminder for everybody listening to this who's drinking or using some other substance because they hate their job or they hate their boss or, whatever. We don't have to stick with that routine. We don't have to have somebody, quote unquote, in charge of us. It's really scary to change, but you can plow your own furrow, right? You can say, hang on, what is it that I want to do that I can do myself, and I'm in control of my own destiny? And there's some wonderment in that and some awe, but there's also some trepidation and fear, right, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. But as just as we touched on before, it gets less. It's sometimes the ripping the Band-Aid off is the most painful part of a process of change. But the next time you're like, well, I've set a precedent before. I coped with ripping that bandage off. I'm going to do it again. But I do completely understand people's fear, and especially in industries like that you worked in. Probably when you first went into it, there were a lot of people in those roles that were still of the a job is for life kind of mentality, and that's what they were told. And if you're told that, you get very comfortable with the situation, you become institutionalized, and therefore it becomes an even bigger obstacle in front of you, this change, because you were never preparing for it, because you were told that you didn't need to change, and now suddenly you have to, and it's up to you. So you're coming from much further back. So that's something when I talk to young people a lot, there's so many opportunities for them to make their own choices and be proactive. And in one way, you can look at it that it's scary, the amount of choices that they've got, but in another way, it was certainly with someone with my way of thinking, not having choices is scary. The status quo is scary. Plateauing through life for me is scary, because I don't know any other way but continue to try and grow and move on and change and create new life experiences. But I completely understand it from the other point of view as well.
And talking about that fear, I was reading on your Substack, like the first post you wrote, you said, I'm both excited and a bit nervous to invite you to join me on this new adventure. Talk about the nerves, the fear, the worries of that kind of
I
thing?
think the nerves and the fears and the worries are nothing to do with me. It's to do with those around me, those who were stakeholders in my journey. I've never had, apart from very, very early days, for example, I've never had a problem with people looking at me, and wondering what's going on. My fear around that was always, how are those close to me reacting when they recognize that someone is looking at me? So my anxiety is around, how do I protect them? Because I know I'm fine. So this journey for me, I'm excited because, I've gotten to a point in my life that I can share, and as objectively as one can, the most traumatic and difficult periods of my life. And it's only adding value to my life. My kind of nerves are coming from, how are those around me going to react, and how can I be there for them? So I'm, nervous about that, because I can't assume that, because when we suffer trauma, we rarely suffer in isolation. It impacts those around us. And what happened to me was not only the biggest thing in my life, but the biggest thing in my family's life as well to have to deal with. So I'm very, very conscious of the impact that what I'm doing, telling my story, is having on them. But that's mixed in with some nerves.
Yeah, it's so powerful, and also great self-awareness for yourself to recognize that. Like my daughter Zia, she's 8 now. When she was little, I was in a park with her, and she was bitten by a German Shepherd, and she got bit on her face, and she had to go to hospital and have stitches and that. And I've always been wary about, I could have done more to protect her in that spot, right? So when I'm around dogs, I'm a little bit on edge. And we was in Japan recently, and fuck knows why, but we went to a Samoyed cafe. Just me and her. And we walk in there, and there's these big, huge fucking wolves. And she's fine, and I'm on edge, until she eventually says to me, I want to leave. And I said, yeah, is this overwhelming for you? She said, and she's 8, this is not overwhelming for me. It's obviously overwhelming for you, Dad. Right? And it was a real wake-up call, Mark, because I realized, here I am thinking my daughter has some trauma to work through, but it's not my daughter has to work through the trauma, it's me. And so that's what you're touching upon really there, isn't it? It's like with trauma, it doesn't just impact, it's not just like someone who's experienced it, it's the people experience it in different ways because of how much they love you, right? And witnessing stuff like that as well, whether they love you or not, as a bystander also. Super powerful, right?
Yeah. It's actually just, we'll get to covering, my accident. I suffered big burns with, I'm sure, but just to really to segue nicely on from your comment there, and then back to mine. 9 years after my accident, I was back at my parents' house. I just got back from traveling, and my mum and my sister was upstairs in the loft in the attic room, and I was in my old bedroom. And my parents got a red-eye flight, a really early morning flight up to Edinburgh to see some family. And my dad put the dishwasher on before he left. And then I got woken by smoke alarms in my house, and my sister came running down. And what transpired is that there'd be an electrical fault with the dishwasher, and it had caught fire in the kitchen. And luckily we had fire doors and to close off the dining room and kitchen that my dad shut. And it was then that I realized that I didn't have any PTSD from, what almost happened. We had to call the fire ambulance. They were there at, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and, the kitchen was burned down pretty much. And friends were sort of saying to me, oh my God, that must have been so hard for you, like just triggering and all this. And I was like, oh God, yeah, I guess it should have been. Oh, I think I'm all right then. But having to call my parents, when they got to my great aunt's house and say what happened, it's how that impacted them. And especially my dad, who'd put the dishwasher on, and he locked himself in a bathroom for a while. I was told, but I was fine. There was no like PTSD within me, and that's something I'm exploring and trying to figure out why, so I can help other people with trauma recovery. But it was still there and greatly there within those around me. And if anything, it was everyone around me got more triggered by what happened than I did. And yeah, that was kind of bizarre, but then a massive lesson for me in terms of just where I was at with my own mental well-being and psyche, and how much I'd not been impacted by this huge trauma in my life.
Yeah, great story. It reminds me of Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps a Score, where he talks about how um, let's say five people all experience the same event. It doesn't mean that they'll all experience the same level of trauma. It's how they will internally process it, I guess, how they were raised, how they grew up, throw a bit of genetics in there as well, how they dealt with the situation. Like, there's so much that goes into it. I'm curious, actually, is obviously we'll talk about your actually in a moment. We're jumping around a bit, but that's cool. I obviously there's a lot of physical therapy, but at that time, I'm not saying you're old enough, Mark, but at that time, was there any psychotherapy? Was there a realization at that time that we need to give this young lad some health and care around mental health?
So my accident happened in 1992, and that was the beginning of really us hearing a lot about PTSD. There was a big growth of PTSD as a movement, if that's the right word for it, in the 90s. But, it hadn't really necessarily made its way to England as much as the US. So, yeah, any kind of therapy wasn't forthcoming. And so my mum, after seeing me having some difficult days while I was still an inpatient, tried to go and see what resource there was, and insisted that they try and find someone. So it's quite a funny story, actually. So one day I'm sat in my ward, and this lady, this therapist, a counsellor, comes in, and but by this stage I'd very much started to take charge of my own recovery. I really knew my own mind and was very supported on that brilliantly by my family and those around me, because they just saw this is the way for me to get the best out of myself. Anyway, so she came in and sat down, and honestly, it felt like she was just out of qualifying and reading from a textbook and saying, making assumptions really about what I might be feeling, and this is what I'll probably be going through, and all these things. And I was just like, no, I'm not feeling that. That's not inside me. And I was like, I really wish you wouldn't try and put that in my head if I haven't experienced it. And after about 15 minutes, I said, look, I'm really sorry, but this isn't working. This isn't helping me in any way. I'm fine. And she just, that's it. She just got up, packed her stuff, and walked out of the door. My mum was still stood by the nurses' station, chatting to a couple of the nurses. And she tells a story that, the nurse the therapist just walked past there, shaking her head like this, going, that kid could give me therapy. He's going to be fine. And everyone just cracked up laughing. And at a similar time, my auntie told me that she was wondering this, and she rang my mum and said, look, what therapy are you getting for him? And she briefly explained the story and just said, Mark's become his own therapist now. And my auntie was like, right, you are. That makes sense. And that was it. So they tried to do some hypnotherapy on me as well, which really was just early days of meditation and mindfulness in this country. But it was described as hypnotherapy, and Paul McKenna was massive on the TV at that stage. So I just thought this bloke's going to come in and going to get me walking up and down the corridor and doing stuff that I don't know I'm doing. So that didn't work at all. I just kept laughing when he was doing it. So no, there was very little. But I'm not massively into, kind of labels and giving people titles. And if they don't have that, then they can't help you. So I did have therapy, but my therapy came from all those people around me. They weren't wearing, therapist clothing or whatever it might be, a uniform. But, my mum, my friends, my family, my physiotherapist was probably the best psychotherapist I ever had. I'd spent more time with her than anyone else. And I just reconnected with her last month, the first time in 25 years. And it was just unbelievable. And we sat for 3.5 hours and talked. And she was the number one reason why I think that I was able to, grow from this experience and process and make sense and move on. She was just extraordinary, but she was there to, to work on my hands, not to work on my head. But inadvertently, she did all that, that poor therapist that I chased out of the room after 15 minutes was trying to do.
Like angels come in lots of different forms, right? Like you don't need a tag on it with angel written on it.
Absolutely.
So I mean, people who are listening to this, if you want to follow Marc's story, go to Substack, or we'll leave the links down below. But just fill us in on what happened, so people are aware. Back when you was 14.
Yeah, so 1992 on holiday in the west of Ireland with my family. Both my parents are Irish, and so pretty much every summer our holiday was going home, as my parents used to call it. And it's a cliche, really, and I wish it wasn't. But I tell your kids, don't play with matches. My cousin Brendan and I did. We were doing nothing dangerous. We were just playing with caps, really, and wrapping them around coins and throwing them at the ground, and they were banging up, making bangers. But we finished our game and we just had one box of matches left. And that night there was a big electrical storm that hit the west of Ireland, so the rain had already started coming. So we just went into my cousin's garage, my uncle's garage, which was separate from the house, behind the house, and just did a little genie, which is light a match, put it in, and see it burn. And it happened to be next to a can of petrol, and sparks and fumes of petrol don't mix. And next thing you know, the can of petrol was on the floor and created a wall in front of me. I probably froze in that moment, and I probably had more time to get out than I've allowed myself to think over the years. But another cousin of mine, Colin, who was the one that raised the alarm from an upstairs window, said, he thinks that I did probably have enough time to get out before it got too serious. But, I can't change that. Passed out, had a crazy near-death experience where I made a choice to live. Somehow then got myself out of the garage through this tiny broken window. So lots of kind of miraculous, unexplainable things really happened in that little moment. There were no emergency services operating at night. We later learned that someone else died of being struck by lightning. So maybe they were busy. So my family were, on their own, desperate to try and get me out. So then my uncle drove like a madman, the 8-9 miles to the local hospital, where they stabilized me, and then had to take me to a fairly newly opened specialist burns unit in St James's Hospital in Dublin. That was an overnight ambulance journey. Again, they wanted to, I think, to deploy a helicopter, but there were no helicopters that could fly at night at that time in Ireland. So across country during the night in an ambulance, I flatlined twice on the way. My mum was in the front. They just said that they were changing drips or something like that. But we got to Dublin alive, and then it was I was about to stay alive, I guess, for the first week. I was in a coma, an induced coma for a while, on a ventilator. They brought me out of that, but then someone didn't read my file properly and administered penicillin to me, which I'm allergic to. That nearly killed me, so I had to go back into an induced coma. Eventually got out of that. There were some mistakes made in Dublin, but they were a relatively inexperienced burns unit, so I don't hold any judgment. But in some operations they didn't treat my hands as well as they should have done in terms of what they were doing. We only found that out when we got to London later on. The pain was big, so they were pumping me full of morphine. But then I got addicted to morphine as a 14-year-old. So they had to cold turkey me off that, which was a 4-day, 3-night experience, which I don't remember much of. But my mum, I think, slept 4 hours during that time because I was in a pretty bad way, hallucinating like mad, pacing up and down the corridor. So we got over that. Multiple operations cancelled, one after me being nil by mouth for 14 or 16 hours. And it was just ridiculous at what, they were putting me through. Luckily, my eyesight was okay. They were really worried that I was going to lose my eyesight because I was burned so badly on my forehead that they thought there's real problems here. So I spent a fair bit of time off. I don't know how long actually, off the ventilator, but with my eyes covered, so I could talk and I could to my family and I could know what was going on, but I couldn't see anything. But luckily, miraculously, another miracle, my eyesight was absolutely fine. I think the hardest thing though that I had to go through were daily 2-hour dressing changes. So they would take me down and lower me into this huge vat, this bath, and dump kilos of blocks of salt in there. And it was like 2 hours of torture every day. But worse than dealing with that was then I'd come out and my mum would say that immediately I'd be incredibly anxious about what was going to happen in 22 hours time. So I had all these challenges early on and had to find ways to overcome them. Otherwise I was going to go insane. And I did find ways, and you start, looking at the smaller things in life and you start appreciating the smaller things. But anyway, yeah, so it's probably, I think 9 to 11 weeks in Dublin. And then my parents knew that they had to get me back to London. I needed world-class treatment. I was in a right old state. And I got accepted into the Roehampton Burns Unit in Queen Mary's Hospital, and full of like world-class people. So I got taken back to England on a commercial flight, but luckily I got the front seat and the VIP treatment of an ambulance, straight up to the steps, and an ambulance waiting at the. I wish it was a limo, but it was an ambulance waiting at the other side. And that's when the really hard work started. But I was surrounded by pioneers in their field, and the best of the best. And it's one of the things actually that my physio Claire said to me, looking back at her working life, there was never a time where everything was so perfectly in place in terms of the best of the best in every position, be it physio in her case, my consultant, John Clark, maxillofacial specialist, hand specialist, nurses, like all of them were the best that she's ever worked with or ever seen. And I just feel very fortunate that, my time, with them coincided with them all being there. But that really, for me, was the real start of, crazy amounts of rehab and recovery. So I had 3 operations in Dublin, got back to London end of September, and I think by the time the year was out, I'd had another 17 operations. So 20 operations in 5 months. The first full week I was there, Operation Monday, Operation Wednesday, Operation Friday. And but it was just the way it had to be. Time is of the essence, and I just had to buckle down and get on with it. But yeah, thankfully I didn't know what was coming. You just take one peak at a time. That's all you can do. One day at a time. That's all you can do. And you talk about, mentioned earlier, making your world smaller. I just had to do that. Live in the moment as much as possible. So in one way, we can look at this and say that it was horrific that this happened to a 14-year-old boy. I was on, the cusp of puberty, literally hit puberty at the same time. But in another way, I was about to go through the second biggest growth spurt of my life, where I could create all these new neural pathways in my mind. And if I could overcome what I was going through now, then I could create, these characteristics, these building blocks that would just last me for the rest of my life. And I just got over peak after peak after peak and set precedents. And I don't know how much I was, aware, looking back, how conscious I was in the moment. But looking back now, I can see how I faced into my fears, how I rose to every single challenge that I faced, and then remembering and learning and instilling wisdom in that, and then knowing it. And it just got a bit easier and a bit easier and a bit easier. And I had all these, character traits that would probably get me in trouble a lot of the time before my accident. My pig-headedness, my stubbornness, my competitiveness, my cheekiness and dry humor and quick wit. All these things became my superpowers because suddenly I had this context to apply them to, and that felt great. Even though all the horrendous stuff that I was having to go through, I felt like this great sense of purpose, that this was the best thing that I've ever done in terms of achievement. Also the worst thing that's ever happened to me, but feeling the fit with what I was going through was pretty amazing. So, and I do look back through rose-tinted glasses for sure, and there's a lot of horrific stuff that my psyche's probably protected me from. But I think that's all part of the journey. So as I'm telling my story now, even if I am looking back with, the things I remember is the sense of growth and things, isn't that we all want when we come out the other side of the difficult, circumstances? So I've been babbling on a bit now, so I'll let you come in, Lee.
No, I mean, beautiful story, and it's like, why would you have to go back and quote unquote fix things if you're happy with your life, right? Usually when you go down the route of therapy, trauma specialists, all that kind of stuff, you're doing it because something in your life is a little bit off kilter and you want to kind of investigate it. And then that's when it goes and it happens. But if we're like going through life and we think everything's gravy and our relationship with ourselves and everybody else is okay, then it might not nudge us in that direction, I mean, there's so many things about your story that I just find incredible. Well, one of them is, I don't know if you have any comment on this, at the time they get you out of the garage and they're kind of looking after you and trying to get you some help. And I remember when Zia got bitten by a dog, which is nothing like what you went through. But I just remember freezing in the time because I didn't know what to do. I was like, fuck, where do I take her? I'm in LA. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I don't know. I've never been in this situation. I don't know what to do. Fuck, what's her mum? Kind of thing. So like all that's kind of going on. You've got all that chaos around you and maybe some calm as well. The unknown, you're slipping in and out of life. But there are times during that moment where you say to him, leave me alone. I want to walk in on my own. Like you're almost like when I'm reading your story, it feels like you're compost mentis and you've just burnt your hand on a freaking fire pan. Yet you in between that, you're also saying to your mom, just let me die. It's like it's such a weird composition of different thoughts and feelings. I don't know if you get anything to share on that.
Yeah, it is weird. I think you can't think too many things when you're in crisis mode and like that, and the pain was so unbearable that it consumed almost everything of me. So the only thing that was left, I think, is to have simple thoughts and not overthink anything else. And I was thinking, shit, we're in trouble here. So I think part of my freezing and not getting out in time was like trying to work out how the hell do we put this fire out? Whereas I should have been thinking that from the outside, not the inside, behind the wall of flames. And so I think when we were on the journey in my uncle's car to the hospital, I think I still was, well, maybe until the other day, I was thinking that we're in trouble here. And I was just making sure that Brendan, my cousin, who was there with me, wasn't going to get all the blame. But then when my mum reminded me that, I said to her and my uncle, just, the pain's unbearable, just let me die. Maybe I was thinking, I'm about to check out here and I need to make sure that my cousin doesn't get, blamed for this for the rest of his life, because I'm just as responsible here. But I don't have a definitive answer in terms of, in terms of how I was able to have these clouded thoughts. But I've amazing admiration for my uncle Porrick, because he was the one that took charge outside the garage and knew what to do. And, it was almost as if his life had been, leading up to that moment in certain ways, in terms of, and I want to feature him. And I think it's owed to his legacy that I do a proper profile on him and the incredible man he was, and what drove him to become a primary school teacher and, a pioneer for kids with learning difficulties in Ireland, back in the 60s and 70s when dyslexia wasn't even known as a term, and how he used to get children, even being a headmaster of a local school, children around his house, to teach them afterwards stuff that he couldn't do, that, within the whatever curriculum that they had, extra support that they needed. And part of being able to do that, he had to go and do a health and safety course. And he wanted to make sure that, if children had accidents, under his care at school, but especially under his care in his own home, that he knew exactly what to do in any situation. And he said to me when we talked about this last year, that he went on his health and safety course, and there was a moment where the instructor was saying that most of you are never going to need to know what I'm about to tell you. If a child in your care suffers burns or serious burns, but you just may save someone's life if you just take this information on board. And he said something within him just made him sit up and take note. And the critical decisions he made once I got out of the garage, consultants later told him, gave me the 3 to 4% chance of living, that I then went on to take. And without his actions, it would have been 0. There's no chance I was going to make it. So I'm in admiration of him and what he did. And, he's first or second in the line of many heroes in my journey.
If you are alcohol free as fuck, or have been for a long time, and you're finding the transition into living a self-led life without alcohol very difficult, then you're in the right place. Strive and the Strive method is designed to help people transition away from a life where you're dependent on alcohol to a life where alcohol is in the rearview mirror. A lot of people think that when they stop drinking, it is the end of a journey, but it is not. It is the beginning. Lots of things get uncovered. We have to face lots of truths. We have to rebirth ourselves and find out who we are. And all these things need guidance, help, and support. Reach out to us today at +44 753 789 6829 or email us at thestrivemethod@gmail.com for further information on how we can help you with our workshops and our coaching so you can live a self-led life alcohol-free as fuck. There seems to be like so many serendipitous moments that came up, in your life, that whilst it's almost like the universe was there to save you and get you through this. I mean, talk about your near-death experience, because I was just sharing it to Liza in the bathroom. She was like, "Oh my God, I got goosebumps." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, it's something I mentioned in the post, and a couple of posts I read about it, that I've never really talked about over the years as much as, I always just kind of left that bit out when I spoke to people. But I think, the last 2 or 3 years, the self-reflective journey that I've been on has definitely been a bit spiritual as well. And then hearing and reading some other experiences, it churned up so many things that I think I'd, archived before. And, before I explain what happened, I can't explain, what it is and if it's real. And to me, that's irrelevant. If people have proven it's a chemical thing in the brain or whatever it may be, I can't tell you there's an afterlife. All I can tell you is that, I went into some place when I passed out. It's like this red kind of space that was weightless and timeless. And, only felt like a few seconds to me now looking back. But I now know that I was in that garage a long, long time. So it was going on longer than I realized. But as I said, that's why time didn't really exist. And I heard in inverted commas 3 or 4 kind of voices. No one was speaking to me. I couldn't see anything. I could just sense these energy sources. And as much as I could make out, I knew I trusted them, and I felt like I should know them, but almost like I've never met them. So the only way I can think who they might be or were ancestors that have already passed over into another realm, and telling me that if I wanted to come with them, it was fine and they would look after me and there's nothing to worry about. And there was an immense sense of peace, and I trusted them completely. And then out of nowhere, I sensed or heard my uncle Porrick, who I just chatted about before, whose house I was staying at, and he was like, no, 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 no. You need to come back to us. There's more that you need to do here on Earth. So don't you be thinking about going anywhere. And I was just like, you're right, Uncle. I'm back. And then immediately I was awake. And immediately after that, I was on my feet. And in my peripheral vision, there was flames going in a burning garage all around me. Luckily, I was never on fire myself. And I was straight away facing this tiny, so there was no back door to the garage, but there were windows down the side, small windows, not much bigger than the computer screen is probably we're talking on, maybe twice as big. And my cousin Brendan had shattered one of them with his elbow while he was trying to work out how to get me out. And then what happened next, I can't describe, but it felt like these two large hands just like grabbed either buttock and just lifted and just threw me out the window. And I went head first out this window, just catching my ankle on the way out. So it was shattered sharded glass all the way around. And I just got one nick on my ankle and I was out. But it felt like I was flying through that window. And again, is it something that we can't explain? It could well just be a huge surge of adrenaline. Like you hear those stories of these frail little mums, turning over cars after a car accident and all these things. And where did they find the strength? So maybe it was just at that moment, everything was channeled in that direction to get me out. But the only thing that I'll take away from it and doesn't change is that I made a choice to live. And from that moment on, I felt like that my life's had some sort of purpose, not always been able to figure out what it is. But that's the beautiful thing of this journey through life, right? It's trying to figure that out as we go. Again, it's cliche, but it is about the journey. But yeah, ever since then, I was like, okay, well, anything that I face, I feel like I've got to be able to overcome it because I chose to live. And why would I have come back? Why would the universe have allowed me to come back if I wasn't able to deal with whatever comes in front of me? So bang, first precedent set in terms of, learning that, that once you get over things, you can, you can learn from it and you can get over things in the future. And then you stop worrying about the future. And then suddenly anxiety is something, that doesn't pop up as often.
I know you said that you didn't tell that story. You kind of kept it to yourself until more recently, but it happened and you experienced it. I'm curious, is it something that you pushed to the back of your mind and kind of forgot about? It was there, but you didn't really deal with it? Or is it something that you tapped into as an aid or as a way that you knew was different about the world that could help you in get through life?
I think both. I think probably more so for many years, the former, in terms of I just pushed it down, didn't really think about it that much. But as I said, in the last couple of years, when I've been self-reflecting and looking into every single aspect of what I went through, suddenly it's emerged as something that's, has got much more meaning to me than maybe I thought before. So I think now that it's something that that I really tap into more, going along. It's weird that you say that, how the universe is kind of seems to serendipitously like work things out for me. It's I was house sitting in Oxfordshire over the weekend and just went to this local village pub, and they had like loads of music acts on the afternoon, and the last act was brilliant. And then he just came over because he knew someone at this random table. I sat down and got chatting to him, and it turns out that his day job is he's a teaches philosophy at Oxford University, and we got chatting, and and I've started to read a bit more philosophy to kind of understand my own story, and I wake up the next day and he's already gone through all my stuff online and read it and suggested me links and things, and he's fascinated by what I think about my near-death experience. So kind of embracing it and sharing it and opening it, it's suddenly I'm probably going to learn more about it, from a philosophical standpoint. And it's weird how, when I need people to come into my life, they just seem to come into my life. It's, my life has been full of serendipity. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's, I mean, there was a couple of things that came up for me then. One of them was I interviewed Neil Donald Walsh on here. He wrote the book Conversations with God. I don't know if you know about it.
No.
So it's him chronicling his conversations with God. I'm not quite sure if he actually had conversations with God or he used that as the kind of metaphorical way of writing this story. But I remember something that always spoke to me was he said something like, I'm going to butcher this, but it was something like, God, why aren't you showing me what to do in this life to make the best of my life? And God said to him, I am. I'm giving you signs every day. You just never see them. And I was like, holy fucking shit. Right. It really struck me at a rational level, actually, of how I could unconsciously go through life with my head down, just thinking about myself, or from a more grounded, conscious perspective, open to great, like almost like optimism versus pessimism, right? You know, we're British and we like to fucking moan a lot. So it's like, it's like, okay, maybe if every time I moan, I'm going to be grateful or appreciative of like four things. And then all of a sudden, you just start to see things that might be nothing. But I think what's key here is that belief, like the belief that God or universe or some angel or somebody showing you something leads you to take action, which you wouldn't have taken action if you didn't have belief. So I don't know if I believe in all this shit, but that's what I believe in. Like, is you can choose to pick up on these signs and take action, and you will move yourself forward, or you don't take action and you stay stagnant. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, my as I said, my parents are Irish. I was brought up Irish Catholic and in the church, and was an altar boy. Just because services were so boring, I might as well have a job to do. So I did that, and so it's early on. I kind of leaned on that for strength, and but very not very quickly, but over the years, moved away from things much more, but I think, I became probably more spiritual the less I was bound by these, these rules and regulations that come with being with Catholic and having Irish parents as well. Guilt and fear is everywhere. And but I've had a lot of friends that, call me a lucky bastard as well. And despite what I've been through, it's almost like I got all the bad luck out with the way. And then my life's been lucky ever since. But to be honest, it hasn't really been lucky. It's the fact that my head's been up and I've been looking for opportunities. And I think there's opportunities there for everyone, but too many people have their head down and they have a negative way of thinking and don't latch onto those opportunities. And I think one of the reasons why, I never, apart from some sort of early terrors, nighttime terrors and stuff, which has been natural for the first, few weeks after what I suffered, I've never had any PTSD. And I think, the way I dealt with my trauma is what I call running into life. And before I started to read about Viktor Frankl and logotherapy, which I'll go into a bit deeper, my understanding was that, well, fuck you, universe. It used to be God and then it was universe. You've taken so much away from me. I feel like I'm owed some, but I can't expect it just to fall on my lap. So I've got to go out there and get mine. So once I made it to university, which was a massive milestone, my 5-year, journey from 14 to 19 was one of, recovery, getting my dignity back and then gaining my independence, something that for a long time I thought that I was never going to be able to do, but I wasn't having any of that. So I got to university, which for me felt like the start, getting to the starting blocks of life. And I remember a very symbolic moment standing in my university hallway and my mum and dad dropped me off and, shook their hands and, hugged my mum and I closed the door and they went back to Croydon and I just, and I stood there in the hallway and it's only happened twice in my life. And I got this all over body reaction. Every single hair is like standing on end on my body. And this wave of emotion came over me. And I thought to myself, you've done it, kid. You've done it. You've finally got here. But for me, it was like the end of the chapter, booked. And from that moment on, I spent the next 25 years, going back to what I described, running into life. And I felt like the universe owed me and I needed to reconcile. So I was going to go and get mine. And yeah, so that's the kind of the way I think about it. I just had this attitude where, God, so much bad's happened to me. Surely, law of averages. And, we've both been involved in a poker world for a long time. It's like, I've got to win a flip soon, right? The cards have got to run my way. So before I even knew about the game of poker, I realized that, the coin had flipped 100, heads, and I was due some tails. And even though mathematically that I know that's wrong. But yeah, that was my attitude to it, really. It was just go out and get mine. And, Viktor Frankl, when I read that book, the Meaning of Life, and it's probably the best book I've ever read in terms of me understanding how we can look at trauma and how we can gain meaning from hard things that we do, and how we, after traumatic experiences, how we can justify that trauma by evening up the score. So some of the best periods in my life, when I recognize that I'm coming out of a tough time or a dark period, and suddenly my motivation to bounce back and just to even up the score, to justify what I've just been through, it's that sense of coming from behind. You're this underdog story, that momentum that you build into life. And it's the way that I get over tough stuff in my life, and always have. It's like I sit with the emotion. I understand that I need to process it. I'm not burying these things, and by doing that, they pass through me quicker, and then go out there and get yours. And I believe that's within all of us. And that's probably the biggest lesson that my traumas taught me in terms of my positive attitude for life.
You touched upon then that period between 14 and 19. Even apart from what you went through, I mean, that's what a fucking age, right? I mean,
yeah,
I remember that age being moved from England to Wales, being called an English cunt, being called a chink, really hating myself because I was different. And then in walks this guy one day, Simon Weston, and he tells his story, and it was an inspiration to me because he was someone who was so different, but he just was so confident, and he was speaking and he was sharing his story, and it gave me a lot of confidence, right? And the word you used there, actually, it tugged me a little bit, was like dignity. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that seems to me like that would be a big battle as well, right?
Yeah, well, my hands were so really badly injured. So, eventually, after lots of operations to get mobility back, I still only had, if we have a score of 100 for one hand and 100 for another, I'd score 71 or 72 out of 200. I had to have that assessment done for future kind of compensation claim. Yeah, so I mean, I couldn't do anything, for myself, like, to start with, and that's even tougher when you're the age that we talked about, right? Just coming into puberty. So, all of a sudden, even when I was, back home and was managed to have weekends back home, my mum would have to wipe my bum, and when I was back home more, my mum would have to bathe me every morning and dry me, and you just started to go through puberty. That's not what you want to happen. Or I remember being I had the biggest operation I ever had was on my right hand, and they took a chunk of skin from my top of my arm and plugged it into arteries down in my hands, and put this patch of skin across my hand so that I could get more functionality and grip on my hands. And it was a huge operation. It was like 9 hours long or something, stupidly complicated and cutting edge at the time. And when I woke up, I was back I had a catheter in because I was going to be bedbound for a week probably. And I'm 15 years old, and when you've got a catheter in for a week and you're 15 years old, someone's got to clean the bad boy downstairs, and clean behind your foreskin and stuff. And oh my God, I'd moved into a children's ward specifically for this operation, and rather than I was in the burns unit in the for all my other operations pretty much, but the hand specialist wanted me in the children's ward. And I went from having amazing nurses who were, a little bit on the older side to suddenly in this children's ward, and they're so hot. And it's just like, and I'm 15 years old, and I've got a tube in my neck. I've got this, this like lilo of hot air across me to keep my body temperature up. I've got this huge bandage on. They did some face operations, and I ended up getting MRSA. So all the good work that they did, the bug just ate it all back. So I had to go into isolation. And my biggest worry was that, am I going to get a bloody hard on when the nurse comes? And it's like, so I look back, and the most traumatic experience from the biggest operation that I ever had was, am I going to be embarrassed and lose my dignity in that moment? Because I tell you what, you learn a lot about mind control in those moments. But yeah, just when I having to go, when I finally got back to school, and I wouldn't be able to do up my own shoelaces, so my friends would have to know how to do it. I had to wear a plastic clear perspex mask for 2 years. So it's like a prison sentence within a prison sentence. And at nighttime it would be all rigid, and in the daytime there'd be one with a mouse attachment, so I could actually talk and move my mouth, but it'd be held on by elastic bands. Now, if I wanted to eat, that needed to be taken off. So I'd have to have someone to do that for me and friends to do that. So it's like not being able to do anything, for yourself. So all these different things, it's just so embarrassing to have to rely on someone to help you, help you get dressed, help you do up your shoelaces. Even when I was, having operations and I couldn't use a knife and fork properly, someone having to cut up your food, and then having your 14-year-old school friends having to take off a little elastic bands, and luckily they were incredible and just started flicking them at my face and all sorts of stuff, and just creating a bit of normality, which is exactly the distraction that I needed. So they were brilliant on that. But it's you're going through a period where you're learning to try and be independent, and you're being blocked because of all these things, and because your hormones are going through the roof. It's just regaining my dignity was a massive motivation for me to keep pushing forward and to do everything that I could to recover as quickly as I could.
Well, Marc, it's been really great talking to you. Such an inspiration. I work with a lot of people. I've worked with a lot of people for like 14 years now, helping people quit alcohol. And the biggest thing that I see in most clients is this need for approval, this need for external approval outside of themselves, and not having built up the capability of loving themselves from within themselves. And when I speak to you, I really feel that you've got that. You know what I mean? That and without that, who knows if you would have got through what you got through? Do you know what I mean? So you're a super inspiration. I'm so glad that you've pivoted and you've got in your van and you're traveling around and you're writing and talking to people about this stuff. Get in as many schools as you can, get in front of as many people as you can, because your story is amazing, Marc. Really appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Lee. I really appreciate that. I'm a fan of the way you've turned your life around as well, and using it for your experiences, but positive change for others. So I'm a little bit further behind that, the journey from you, but you've proven that there is a path there. And and it's great that the things that you recognise in me are the most important things, for me that keep me going. So that shows that hopefully I'm talking about it in the right way and can help as many people as I can, because that's what life's all about.
And if people want to reach out to you, Substack's one way to tell the people how to get hold of you.
Yeah, so Substack is one way. It's MakingAMarc is the name, Marc with a C at the end. So you can find me on Substack. LinkedIn's another great way to get hold of me as well. And I'm occasionally on Instagram as well. So you can always DM me on there. And my handle is the Conv. So it's the_Conv, which is a nickname from my poker years.
Yeah, it is indeed. And all of you listening out there who have businesses or your employees or your employers, reach out to this guy, get him in to talk wherever you are, because he went through a very traumatic experience, but it's trauma within everybody, which is causing so many difficulties and problems. And here's a guy who's done it all and come through the other side and continues to blaze a trail. So get hold of him. Marc, much love, bro.
Much lovely. Thanks very much.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. Just a few thank yous. First of all, I want to thank you guys and girls for listening to this podcast and being supporters of it. Many people stop drinking alcohol just by listening to this podcast. I get a lot of people reaching out to me, thanking me for that, right? So give this to somebody as a gift today, or rate and review the podcast. If you can rate and review the podcast on your local podcast player and tell somebody about it, you could change somebody's life today, okay? So thank you for listening, and thank you in advance for that piece of service. Also want to thank our producer, Stan. Stan is still currently in the Ukraine, fighting the war and producing our podcast while his family is somewhere else in the world right now, okay, apart from him. So everybody send out your prayers and your love. Stan, we love you. Thank you very much for everything you do here. For you out there, if you are starting to think about, contemplate, reflect on your relationship with alcohol, you do not have to do this alone. Yes, you drink alone, but you don't have to stop alone, okay? And if alcohol is not your thing, but you are starting to feel that you actually are living a parts-led life, the ego is getting in the way too much, so you're not happy with the way life is going, then reach out to us at thestrivemethod@gmail.com. Just say, Lee, and just tell me what is on your mind, and we'll start to have that conversation. Strive community is a beautiful place where you can start to feel seen, heard, and matter. It's where you can get community, and it's where you can start practicing what we call the 8 C's of self, our core values, right? Of creativity, curiosity, connection, compassion, courage. I can't remember the rest of them, but there's 8 of them, right? And we have our quest structured. So we have assignments, and they're really interesting, exciting. At the end of them, we say to you, come on, do this quest, right? Get involved in this challenge. And strivers are really finding it exciting, and they're working their challenges in these areas that are going to increase the amount of time they spend in self-energy, in a state of flow. And that has amazing repercussions for the relationship you grow with yourself, and for how you reach out to others in their life, like how you parent, how you are as a child to your, not child, but a son or a daughter, how you are in the relationship with the person you share your bed with, and how you behave with your employees, right? So reach out to me at thestrivemethod@gmail.com if you want to learn more. Okay, much love, everybody.